Hi, I'm Larry King, and you're watching Coping with COVID. This is a series brought to you by PositiveVoices.com and the International Positive Psychology Association. My co-host on this edition of Coping with COVID, as always, is Dr. James Pawelski, professor at the University of Pennsylvania, Positive Psychology Center, and founding executive director of the International Positive Psychology Association, who is our guest today. James.
Hey, Larry, it's great to see you. Great to see you. We've got a really special guest today. Lea Waters is the past president of the International Positive Psychology Association. She's calling in, joining our call from Australia today. So I think it's actually tomorrow over there. And she is a psychologist, a university researcher, a speaker, and author of the acclaimed parenting book, The Strengths Switch, which has been translated into 10 languages. She's also put together a webinar on how families can stay strong during COVID-19. So it's a great delight to have her joining us.
Thank you. What was the name of the book again?
The name of the book is The Strengths Switch.
And here I am.
Welcome.
Hello. Lovely to be here. Larry, oh my goodness, what a thrill it is for me to have this opportunity to speak to you.
I know how thrilled you are, Lee. I can almost feel it, the thrill going.
Yes, all the way from Australia. It's one of these little like pinch myself moments in my career as a young girl watching your show from Australia to the US, and now kind of in person I get to meet with you, and I'm so excited to have an interview with you.
How did you get involved with parenting?
Well, parenting. So I've been a psychologist for 25 years and specializing in parenting and how we create happy families. And really the journey for that has been a very personal one. I was raised in a family with a lot of abuse, and as a result of that, struggled with eating disorders in my teenage years and suffered from a lot of anxiety and depression in my early adulthood as a result of the psychological injuries of the abuse. And very sadly, lost my sister to suicide. She was in her early 40s. I was in my mid 40s. And I think just my experience of growing up with a family who wasn't happy really motivated me to become a psychologist. I understand suffering. I want to help people, and really specifically focusing on research of how do we create happy families so that I could give my own two children this sort of opposite life to what I had growing up, and so that I could help as many families as possible across the world to thrive and have that home basis as the safe, beautiful start into their life.
So Lee, it's been a real privilege for me to know you and to count you as a friend and colleague for maybe a decade now. It's been quite
more than probably. It's great to see you, James, too.
It's great to see you as well, Lee. And one of the things that I so deeply appreciate about you is your authenticity. It's easy to misunderstand positive psychology as just being about, butterflies and rainbows and sunny days. And certainly positive psychology has nothing against positive emotion, but it's also about the real world. It's about where we find ourselves. And so your ability to be authentic and real while at the same time hopeful is such an inspiring thing for all of us. And I want to ask you about another question about parenting. So many parents these days, my wife Susie and I these days, let's bring it down and get it real, are having challenges. Yeah. We're having challenges as parents. We're working. Our son is home being schooled and so forth. And so what kinds of advice do you have for people like us who are parenting in very new ways and much more part of the day than we're used to?
Yeah, that's such a great question to start off with, James. And firstly, just let me say, I hear you. We've got two teenagers, two adults, one home, 24/7, 6th week of quarantine. So, this is such a perfect opportunity for me to put my own research into practice in my own little kind of bubble of a home. And I think the most important thing for us all at the moment, I would say self-compassion. And often when we hear the word compassion or self-compassion, we think of it as a bit of a self-indulgent kind of let ourselves off the hook, being too gentle, being too weak. But really, compassion is not about weakness. If you think about the definition of compassion, the act of compassion is to witness someone else's struggles or suffering and seek to alleviate that. So you have to actually be quite strong to be able to sit in someone else's struggle, in someone else's suffering, and want to alleviate it. So compassion actually comes from strength rather than self-indulgence or kind of letting someone off the hook or being too gentle or being too sort of namby-pamby and weak. So if you take the definition of compassion and you apply it to yourself at the moment as a parent, self-compassion. So for example, you have a friend call you up and she's a mom and she's in tears, and I'm pretending this is a hypothetical, but I've had this experience this week, one of my girlfriends who's just saying, I'm not coping well today, Lee. I'm not getting my work done. I'm not being productive. I'm not meeting my deadlines. I feel like I'm failing as a mom because I don't know how to homeschool, and I feel like my kids are falling behind. I'm exhausted. And on top of that, I put on 5 pounds. So in that moment, you offer compassion. My heart dropped. I felt really bad for my friend. And we just talked through it. I said, you know what? No one is at their best right now. No one can be as productive as possible. We're all learning as we go. You'll lose the weight when you go back.
What is strength-based parenting? Why does it matter?
Yeah. Okay. So strength-based parenting is an approach to parenting where you focus first on building up the positive qualities and the skills of your kids before you focus on compensating and fixing what's missing and what's lacking them. So it's really about where we place our attention first as a parent. And why it's important is because many of us were raised, and we're raising our kids under this false assumption that it's their weaknesses that are preventing them from being happy or successful. And because of that false assumption, we think we have to kind of fix all their flaws and weaknesses and overcome their overcomings. Actually, the research shows us that our weaknesses do play a role in limiting our ability to be successful and happy, but the larger role is an underdeveloped strength. So when we focus from a strength-based parenting perspective, we're fixing the weaknesses of our kids, but we're actually putting more emphasis on developing up their unique strengths so that they can live to their full potential and be happy.
So how does that work now in the time of the coronavirus with the quarantine? How does that function?
Yeah, great question. And so it's sort of, I guess, getting back to your question before, James, about we need to have compassion with ourselves and not always be so perfect and be forgiving. But we also have this unique opportunity in COVID where we are 24/7 with our kids. So we're getting to see our kids. I've got 2 teenage kids. I'm actually getting to see sort of what they're like at school. I'm getting to see them as a learner. I'm listening in, maybe I shouldn't be, but I'm hearing their friends with their conversations over Snapchat and house party. So this is an opportunity for us to really tune into where are we seeing those unique strengths and talents and assets of our kids. Maybe we hear a lot of caring in a conversation with our friends, or we see our child be organized with their learning, or we see our child be playful, or we see them demonstrating leadership. So we have this opportunity right now to zoom in and look at the talents and the skills they bring. Another key part about strength-based parenting is where we place our attention first, which is what I mentioned before. And I think one of the stresses we're all dealing with now in COVID is our attention goes to the negative. So it's very easy to focus on those moments where our kids aren't engaging in learning. It's very easy to worry that they're eating too much junk food. It's very easy to take hold of the moments where they're in a bad mood and they're stressed. But strength-based parenting gives us that step back and says, yes, there are moments where they're not engaging in learning, but there are other moments where they were pretty engaged. And yes, they're eating too much junk food, but I'm noticing that the fruit bowl is slowly diminishing. And yes, they're stressed and frustrated and they're snapping at us, but 10 minutes later, they're laughing with their mates on Snapchat, or they're being kind to their sister. So it really gets us to step back and see the full picture. And COVID gives us this really nice opportunity to say, what are the strengths of our family? How can we draw on those to cope more effectively? Who's got humor? Who's got kindness? Who's got patience? Who's got really good intellect and research skills so they can go and research the internet about how we get home shopping? Who's got the technical skills so they can set up our home studio? So really taking this time to say, what are the strengths of each family member and how can we use them to cope effectively with this really unusual time we're going through?
What is strength switch? You came up with that term. What are you talking about?
Okay, so the strength switch actually came from a moment in my parenting where I was not being a strength-based parent. Let's put it that way. I'll say that diplomatically. And I really had this moment where I was having an argument with my son, who was 8 then. He's almost 18 now. And I realized, okay, I'm tired, I'm stressed, I'm focusing on everything that he's doing wrong, and I'm not giving him a chance to say what are the things that he's doing well. So the strength switch for me was it was just an image of like a light switch in my head, where I was, okay, when I'm in that full-blown negativity bias and I'm tired and I'm seeing everything wrong with my son, with my child, what I'm going to do is imagine going into my brain and flicking on this light switch. So when the light switch is off and it's dark, that's when I'm seeing everything that's wrong and focusing on the weaknesses. But if I have this little mental hack of flicking on the light switch, that's when I'm reminding myself, focus first on what is right with my son and my daughter, focus first on their good qualities and their assets before I feel like I have to fix everything that's wrong with them.
How does that help, that strength-based parenting idea, help children who are dealing with adversity?
Yeah, that's such an important question for now, but just more generally. And what we find about our strengths is that everyone has their own unique strengths. And when we cultivate our strengths are things that give us energy and they give us confidence, and they're the things that we do well. So, if I use you as an example, Larry, you're a fantastic interviewer. You have this capacity to keep an open mind, to take information very, very quickly, sort it all out, analyze it, and then ask the next question. So that's a real strength of yours. And when you are using your strengths, you're in flow, you have confidence, you have energy. So the more that we can connect our kids to their own unique strengths, and it might be strengths like yours, it might be intellect, or it might be, they're really good at sport, or they're really good with technology, or they just have those beautiful kind of social and emotional intelligence type of skills. The more we connect our kids with their skills, the more confident they feel, the more energy they have. And ultimately, our strengths are our anchor point. Everywhere that we go, our unique strengths go with us in the good times and the bad. And they're a really important barometer and almost like a magnet that pulls you out of adversity and helps you to make the most of the good times. In my own case, growing up with struggling and suffering and mental illness and abusive parents, I look back now and I think it was my strengths of compassion and humanity and like genuinely wanting to help people. And they almost kind of pulled me out of that scenario. They pulled me into the future to become a psychologist, to write the book, to help other families. I don't know what I would have done, how I would have come out of that situation if I didn't have my strengths. And I think it's the same for all of our kids right now. They're going through a huge adversity. And one of the best things we can do as parents is connect them up with their unique strengths.
So Lee, that's so beautiful. And Larry, I know you as a child faced a lot of adversity. I mean, when you were 9, your dad passing away, and then your mom did a pretty good job of, stepping in and helping you to become resilient. Would you say that she practiced strengths-based parenting?
I guess she did without knowing she was doing it. She was a single mom, never remarried. Although in retrospect, she did spoil me. I had to overcome that because she gave me what I wanted. I don't know, Lee, if you can. She never. This puzzles me. No one takes lessons. Any two people can become parents, right?
Yeah.
There's no lessons in parenting when you first have a child, unless we go to people like you. But not many people in the world can reach people like you. So, how do you begin? How do you train someone to be a parent when we can bet the fact that their parents weren't trained?
Yeah, firstly, I just love that insight. I mean, we go through 12 years of high school, we take driving lessons to learn how to drive, we become workers and we get regular professional development. Any new skill that we want to learn, we get training for and education for. And then parenting, which is arguably the most profound and difficult role, there's no education. So look, I think there's we need to have a lot of intention around this. So, some people are really fortunate and we're raised in very happy families, functional families. And so they just role model what their parents did for them. And then others maybe use their own experience to commit to doing it differently. nowadays, of course, we have the internet. So yeah, there's a lot of resources and good YouTubes that we can go out and have a look at. I guess my biggest advice is think about what kind of parent you want to be, and have that as the goal and work towards that. And that's a really important thing to do right now, even with COVID. Like, what do you want your family to come out of at the end of COVID with? You know, what is the big goal here? And for me, with my own kids, my goal is that they look back on COVID, and they have a happy memory of it. You know, they can say, yeah, that sucked. I never got to see my friends. I didn't really like working from home. My 17-year-old son said, it's like I'm doing homework 8 hours every day, Mum. I hate it. But I want him to look back and say, despite that, you know, we had some fun times as a family. We had meals together. I didn't have to catch the school bus. I got to walk my dog. So as a parent, what are the memories that you want your kids to have when they're old and they're talking to their grandkids and they say, I survived the corona pandemic? What is the memories you want them to have? And it's similar to us as to your question, Larry. You know, what type of parent do you want to be? Just think about it intentionally. Don't just do it by default.
So Lee, are you saying that there may be a way in which our kids coming out of the pandemic might actually be stronger?
Yes, I'm absolutely saying that. And, you know, it's backed up by theory. We've got Virginia Satir's research. She was a family therapist over in the US for 5 decades. And she actually studied what happens to families when they're hit with sudden change. Like in Larry's situation, when his father died, or if a family has a family member who's ill or loses their job. And what she found is that, you know, most families kind of come out of the other end, life as usual. But some families actually grow as a result of going through that trauma and that adversity together. In psychology, we call that adversarial growth. It's a big fancy word for the fact that we can put in place some conditions right now in this time of uncertainty. And I think one of those conditions is using our strengths and connecting our kids with their strengths and self-compassion. And we come out of it stronger, knowing that we can survive that adversity and knowing that the next time life throws a curveball at us, we've got it. We can do it.
And can strength parenting spoil kids?
I love that question. Thank you so much for asking that. And I did hear you say that your mum was a strength-based parent and also maybe spoiled you a little bit.
Very, very spoiled.
I think there's a difference between being strength-based and spoiling. I know, you know, we're all having a backlash against the self-esteem movement and give every child a trophy just because they participated. That's not a strength-based approach. When you give every child a trophy, you are not looking at who the child is and what they have done. Strength-based approach is the opposite. It's deeply looking at who the child is and what they have done. And it's not about false praise, it's about concrete feedback. So it's not spoiling the child, because you don't have to worry that you're always sort of blowing them up with hot air. Do you guys use that expression in the United States? Filling someone up with hot air? Yeah, you don't have to worry about that, because your kid's not going to be using their strengths every minute of the day. So you're not always praising them. You're still dealing with their weaknesses. You're still dealing with discipline and their behavior. So it's not about spoiling, but it is about amplifying their positive qualities and their assets.
It sounds like then, Lee, you're arguing that strengths are things that can come out both in sunny times and in cloudy times. And it's not a matter of, oh, it's only for the good days or it's only for the bad days. It's for any day, seeing how they can be expressed and how you as a parent can try to help the kids identify those strengths and cultivate them. Would you agree?
Yeah, spot on, James. You just said that so well. And that's one of the reasons why there's so many beautiful topics in the field that you and I both conduct science into. And there's gratitude and mindfulness and savoring and self-compassion. There's so many to choose from. It's a smorgasbord. But the reason why I went for strengths is because I think you get 2 for the price of 1. Strengths serve you so well in those times of adversity because they are that kind of concrete anchor point that pulls you forward into the future. But when times are going well, your strengths are the things that help you to amplify, to build your potential, to make the most of the great opportunities. So they have relevance in both the sunny times and the dark times.
My son, Chance, is a junior at University of Southern California, great school, but they had a big scandal, parents bribing faculty to get their kids into school. Now, those parents would probably say, we did wrong, but we were trying to do our best for the kids to get them into a better school. Mm-hmm. How do you explain that? Those parents thought they were doing the right thing, USC over Hopscotch University.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So if I come from a strength-based perspective on that, the idea behind strengths is that you plug every child is born with their unique strengths, and your role as a parent is to kind of plug the electricity cord into those strengths and build those up. And when you do that, it's your child's strengths and their own ability that helps them to make the choices and navigate their world. And what that does is it relieves you of the worry and the pressure as a parent of thinking, I've got to change the external conditions. In this case, bribing a university, I've got to change the external conditions to map out a pathway for my child. Instead, what you're doing is you're standing behind your child and you're having faith that their unique strengths, whether it's interpersonal strengths or intellectual strengths or athletic ability or creativity, that their strengths is what's going to help them guide their pathway forward and be recognized. Does that make sense to you, Larry?
Uh, any what?
Does it make sense, what I've just said?
Of course it makes sense. I know James wanted to ask you about strength parenting and the idea of giving everybody a trophy. Is that's standard in Little League? Everyone.
And they're big trophies. I mean, they're getting bigger and bigger. So we're gonna have to get a separate trophy room, I think, for our son's trophies.
I never quite understood that, Lee. If one kid is a better player than another kid, doesn't he deserve a bigger trophy?
Yes, I believe so. As I said to you before, it's, strengths are about, the thing is, when you play with strengths, every unique child has their own individual strengths. So they may not get a trophy in baseball, but they may really feel great about themselves and their capacity to, to do a gaming thing and get great at gaming, or have the gift of the gab, or know that they can walk into any room and be able to communicate with people because they've got that social intelligence. So they don't need the external validation of a false trophy for participation, because they're connected up with their own unique strengths, which are energizing and which build confidence in them.
So let's talk about the identification of strengths. So as a parent, do I just have the capacity to observe what my kids' strengths are? Do they change? Do they emerge? Do I need to get some kind of special training to find them? How can we identify the strengths in our kids?
You know what, I just have to say, I'm loving these questions, actually. I'm seeing each of your unique strengths of curiosity and intellect and an analysis coming through. And no, I don't think we have the natural ability to to spot strengths in other people, just because we haven't been conditioned to do that. And I'll tell you what, though, I mean, I'm doing lots of work with schools at the moment. And when you introduce strengths to young kids, they get it straight away, and they start to spot strengths in their kids. But in our generation, we weren't trained to do that. Having said that, it's a pretty easy skill to develop. And as a parent at home right now, if you're in COVID, what you're looking for is signs of high performance, a skill that your child can do pretty easily. They'll have a quick learning curve. They'll be above age expectations for what you would expect. You're looking for signs of energy. So you'll know your child is using a strength when they're very energized, and you can see their body language and you can hear their voice. They lose track of time. They're just going to flow in that particular activity, and where they have that sense of confidence. So you're looking for performance, energy, and confidence. When you see those signs, that's a little indication to you that, oh, my child is currently using a strength. There's a strength in play here. So that's one way of doing it. Another way, of course, is there are surveys that you can do. And this is one thing that I would really encourage families to do during COVID time. There are free surveys that you can do that identify your strengths as a parent and your children's strengths if you have children over the age of 10. I've actually got a link, and it's a free survey, and I've got a link to that survey up on my website, James and Larry. So I'm not sure if you're doing show notes afterwards. You can put up my website. I've got a lot of free resources, but the survey is a great thing to do now as a family. Sit down, you've got time, sit down, do your survey and have a conversation about, well, someone's got humor and someone's got creativity and someone's got perspective and wisdom and someone's got analytical skills, and how can we use these right now to cope effectively with COVID?
What kind of parent are you? There are some who use the axiom, do as I say, not as I do.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of parent is Lee?
I really see myself as the guide from the side. I feel really blessed to have two beautiful children who've come into the world, and I'm kind of there as their guide. I'm not an authoritarian parent. I'm not really about authority and do as I say. I'm much more about autonomy and how it is that I can be there coaching my kids from the side and kind of showing them I'm a little bit ahead of the pathway. I can show them what to do and give them these opportunities, but I see myself more as a teacher rather than a authoritarian.
Jim?
Lee, I've got a 9-year-old who I think if you asked him what his strengths are, he would say playing video games all day. And he would definitely not include among his strengths eating his vegetables. What do you do in a case like that? Because as a responsible parent, I can't have no vegetables and video games all day long.
No, very relatable question. And I'll just tell a little story about what happened in my home the other day. So my son, who's in year 11, 17, was supposed to be in the moment of an English class. He'd clicked on that he was. I came into his bedroom. He's actually on Fortnite with two other guys who are in his class, supposedly in English in that moment. So why I share that story, and I relate to what you're saying about your son, is that you don't have to be strength-based all of the time. Sometimes you just require good old parenting to say, actually, no, you do need to eat your vegetables because they're healthy for you, and I am going to have limits on screen time.
Give us some tips. This is for James and I both, I guess, some tips about how you parent today. Are there different rules for parenting when you have this kind of emergency?
Yeah, great question. And I think, you probably won't be surprised to hear me say this as a positive psychologist, but I think there are two things we need to do, and that is zoom into our child's distress, allow that distress, allow them to have their moments of stress, frustration, anger, fear, doubt, acknowledge that, legitimize it, but equally put some intentional thought into how do we create happy moments during the day of COVID. And that's not just a feel-good thing. When we create happy moments, and I'll give you some concrete examples in a moment of how to do that, but when we create those happy moments and those happy family rituals, we are changing the brain chemistry of our kids in that moment. We're boosting serotonin and oxytocin and dopamine, and that's kind of fortifying their brain to be able to think more clearly with the problems they're dealing with and to have that physiological resilience. So how do we parent differently and intentionally bring in positive family routines? It's things like setting up a gratitude jar. I actually have one here. I'll show you. Excuse me, I just went off the screen for a moment, but I've set up a gratitude jar. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've set up a gratitude jar at home. We've got our little post-it notes, and I'm encouraging my kids, even though life sucks at the moment, you can't get to see your friends and you're trapped under the foot of your own parents, little moments of gratitude like playing with the dog, the sunshine, the smell of good coffee, having a great Insta chat with a friend, put it in the gratitude jar. And I've promised them that when COVID is over, we're going to go to their favorite cafe. They can order whatever they want off the menu. They can order double chocolate milkshakes. And we're going to go through this gratitude jar and pull out. And remember that even in the dark times, there are little moments of positivity. So gratitude jar is a specific thing to do. What went well every night, asking your kids just one thing that went well for you today, creating a positive music soundtrack. And that works particularly well if you've got kids whose strengths are sort of musical and artistic and creative, creating a laughter library of funny movies, funny YouTube clips, funny little memes. There are lots of intentional things that we can do differently as a parent right now to intentionally foster that positive brain chemistry.
You were talking about gratitude. It just so happens that where I am in Philadelphia, it's 7 p.m. and my neighbors are on the balconies clapping, banging pots and pans, expressing gratitude to the frontline folks who are in the hospitals and in the stores and so forth, helping to keep us going. So I just wanted to point that out, that there are a lot of ways of expressing gratitude these days. Back to you.
That's really beautiful. I love that, James. Yeah. Community gratitude, especially for our frontline workers.
Lee, we're almost done. Give us some habit parents can use after watching this interview. Give us some tips on parenting.
Right. Okay. I reckon one of the biggest habits is adopting a position of curiosity. When we have that curiosity, like you do, Larry, curiosity is sort of the antidote to judgment. So we're not judging our kids in the moment and coming straight into punishment and shame on the child. We're stepping back when they're doing things that we don't want them to do, like playing Fortnite when they should be doing an English lesson. don't get me wrong, I didn't let him get away with that, but I adopted a position of curiosity. Okay, why would he be doing this right now? And then I asked him, and I learned that, well, the English teacher all she's doing is a pre-record of the English literature book. And he's like, well, I can just read that later, Mum. So when I heard that explanation, I'm able to say, okay, my heart rate goes down. I'm not failing as a parent. He is still going to learn his English lessons. So that would be one of my biggest tips, is just adopt this position of curiosity. Remember to breathe. Just remember to take a breath and pause, and remember to look for the good in your kids.
Jim, I think she has been a terrific guest.
I totally agree. I've been taking notes, and our family is going to be the better for it.
You have made my day, the both of you. But so lovely to get gorgeous compliments from two men that I have such admiration for. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And it's the start of the day for me, so I'm going to have a great day now.
Thank you, Lee. Have a good day. It's the end of the day for us.
Yeah, well, enjoy your evening, and it's just been a delight. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and just wishing the best to all these parents out there at the moment. You know, there's lots of practical things we can do, and it's not a trite thing to say, look for the strengths, focus on the positives, and set a goal to come out stronger as a family.
Have a good morning.
Thank you, Lee. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Jim, I got a lot from that. There's no school of parenting, and as I pointed out to Lee, any two people can become parents.
Some things that stood out for me, Larry, in what Lee said. First of all, just parents should have self-compassion, right? So that's that's a really good thing to keep in mind. And then have curiosity about the kids, and really look at what the strengths are and practice the strength spotting, looking at what kids are able to do well, what they have energy around and confidence around. And that can be something we can just kind of observe. It can also be something that we can rely on these online tools and surveys to do. So I just want to mention Lea Waters' website, where a lot of these tools are. So it's www.leawaters. So it's LEAWATERS.com. Lots of great tools on there to help parents be able to identify the strengths in their kids.
This has been a great edition of Coping with COVID. I'll see you next time, James.
Take care, Larry.